If this is the first time that you've opened Houdini, you will probably have an interface that looks very similar to mine. If you've changed your interface or your panel layouts at all, and you want to follow along with what I'm doing, you can go up here and go into the Build Desktop. While we're here, I'll talk just very briefly about this. They have various desktops that are pre-configured with different panels and different options in here. It can be very useful to change these as you are moving through different tasks that you're doing in Houdini. And we'll get into some of these a bit later. So very briefly, I'm going to talk about what the various panels here are, and we're not going to get too much into the nitty-gritty. This is just an overview of what they do. And as we start working more and more, it's going to be more apparent about what everything does, and we'll take a bit more time to go through the various options here. But I'll gloss over a few things just so we have an understanding. So up here would be your typical file menu that you see in an application. You can save your projects, open projects, start new projects, import and export things. You may not have a labs option here. If you don't have this, you can look into installing Side Effects Labs. It's a very useful suite of tools. And I'm not going to get into it just yet, other than to say it's useful. And if you don't have this here, that's the reason why. So over here, we have our shelves, and the shelves have icons that when you click them, do a thing. So sometimes it's putting down one node, sometimes it's running a script, sometimes it is putting down a series of nodes and connecting things. We can take a quick look at how this works. So if I click here and choose a box, let me try that again, didn't stick. Okay, now I have a box and I can move around the scene, and wherever I click, we now have a box. It's not always useful to do this because sometimes you want things dropped right in the center of the scene. So I'm going to select this down here and I'm going to hit delete to delete it. And if you hold down the control button while you click, you're going to get your box put right into the middle. So I usually control click these things. All right, over here we have this panel here, or this pane as it's called. And this is our scene view. This is our 3D view. You can go onto the camera mode here. So these are our tools that let us interact with this view. You'll see we have our camera mode here, and you can use this. I'm pressing left mouse, middle mouse, and right mouse to do the various zoom, dolly, and pan options here. If you don't have that selected, for instance, you're in another tool, what I like to do is hold down the space key, which temporarily will enable this, and then we can move around. When you let go of the space key, we are back to the previous operator that we were using there. So that's very useful. These are your manipulators, basically. And we'll get into what these do as we start working a bit more in Houdini. You might notice these down here. I'll quickly talk about them. This is your flipbook generator. So this is making a series of images of whatever is happening in the viewport so that you can look at it in real time. This will start to render. Over here, you can change the various view that you're looking through. So right now we're looking through a perspective view, but I could look through a top view. I could look through the right view, and you'll see that reflected here. And then here you get to choose whatever is the active camera. We don't have a camera yet, so there's nothing to look through right now. I'm going to go back into perspective view. While we're up here, you will notice that we have some options here, and we'll get into some of these a bit later, but just to quickly gloss over them. Here you can change your layout. So now I have 4 different views together, 2 views stacked, etc. This we 100% will get into later, but this lets you understand what's happening when you're inside or outside various subnetworks in here. And these are your viewing options. The little pin tabs will pin a panel here so that it can't be changed by you going into various other contexts and stuff. But again, we'll talk about that later as well. Here you have various viewport options, and Right now we have no objects in our scene, so it's not going to become apparent, but we'll quickly take a look at that right now. I'm going to put down a sphere. So in this panel here, I'm just typing the word sphere. I'll grab that first one and I'll put that down. I'm going to put a camera in the scene as well. And then I'm going to put an area light in the scene. So this gives us everything that we need to look at. I'm going to grab the area light. I'm going to go to our manipulator handle here, and I'm just going to drag the light away. And now we see the light is affecting the sphere. Our camera is all the way over here, actually. Kind of hard to see, but what I'm going to do is grab this other little handle and just put it kind of in the center and move the camera off to the side. Now this isn't very useful because we can't look through our camera right now, or rather we're not looking through our camera. So let me show you how to do that. Go up here, and now that we have a camera in the scene, we can select our camera. Now we're looking through the camera. Now if I move around with the camera tool, so I'm going to hold space and start moving around, what you'll notice is that we have snapped out of our camera view and we are back in our perspective view, not looking through a camera. So that doesn't really help us frame our scene very well because we want to be able to interactively move the camera using our standard tools. So the way that you do that is you go over here and you can click lock. And what lock will do is it will say any movement that I'm making right now is actually affecting the camera that we are looking through. And you can see that this is turned red to showcase that. So now I'm going to do this and I'm going to frame up this sphere exactly like I want it. And when I'm done with that, I can click that lock button again, and now I'm back out. The camera is framed exactly where we want. Now, let's say we wanted to position this light a little better. We can go into two views side by side. Here I can look through my camera. Here I am in perspective view. Now I can grab this light and I see, well, that's actually visible in the camera. Maybe I don't want that. Move that around a little bit there. All right, and now I've set that light. So now this brings me to some of the options here. And what I wanted to point out is a lot of these have to do with how things are displayed in the viewport. So here we can turn off all of the lighting and everything is flat shaded. Here we have very basic unlit shading. This is a very simplified shading model, so it's showing our shading. And then here we're not going to notice many differences, but these are higher quality shading options. This is attempting to do some basic form of shadows or something in here. I'm not really sure why it's looking so blocky, but could be because we don't have a good material assigned in there at all. Here we can turn materials on and off, which won't matter because we don't have any materials assigned. Displays for our grid on and off. And here we have various filters of objects that we would like to see or not see in the scene. And again, you can display points, you can display your normals, which show which way your surface is pointing, velocity information, point numbers, various displays for how things and what things are displayed in here. You can also press the D key in that view, and you have other options that will impact what you're seeing in here. I'm not going to go through all of these right now, but usually the one that I will change a lot is background, and here I'll change my color scheme to dark sometimes, or this dark gray one, which is part of the labs tool set. So usually it has a standard gray, but there's a dark gray one, which is part of labs. For now, we'll stick on to light. So that covers most of this here. Now we'll go over to this panel here, since we did put some nodes in here, and briefly talk about this. This is our node editor. And the node editor is where you put down nodes and you make connections and you author a Houdini scene. every time you select a node, what you're going to see is the parameter editor, which is up here, is going to change to reflect the parameters that are available and authored on that node. And you'll notice any parameter here that I change. So if I press 1, this thing moves over 1. Anything here will change something about what is authored in this object. So this object is authored to have translation interface in here, a translation interface, and that means that if I make a change here, the translation information is going to change, right? Pretty simple if you're used to 3D programs, or pretty much any other program that uses a similar methodology. These options are going to change based on what you have selected. So you'll notice if I select an area light, all of a sudden we've got different options in here as well. Now, while I'm up here, you might notice a couple other little tabs, and down here are other little tabs. So I'll quickly talk about some of the other tabs here. In the scene view, this is part of the build tab or build desktop. You have other things that you can look at in these windows. You can always add your own panes and tabs in here just by selecting the new pane tab type, choosing whatever it is that you want, and it appears in here. If you don't like it, just click X and it will go away. And you'll see that all over here as well. But for now, we're going to stick right here. I do want to point this out here. This is our context switcher and our network path tools. So right now we're in this context called object in here, but you'll see if I double click into sphere, now we're in the geometry level here. So I'm going to go back up. We're in objects. These are kind of like big containers of operators and things that eventually will output a thing, and double click to dive inside. And now we're in here where we actually have access to the little components that are making up whatever this sphere thing is. We can always add things in here. Just as a quick example, I'm going to put down a box, and I'm going to change our viewing flag, which is this blue one, into a sphere, or excuse me, into the box one. And now, instead of looking at a sphere, we are looking at a box. And that's not just inside here. We press the U key to go up one level. Even though this is labeled sphere, it now outputs a box. And the reason is this is not a sphere. I know we're getting a little bit into the weeds, but it's worth talking about here. This is a thing called geometry, actually. And inside the geometry is whatever we want to output. So this tool that we used, either it was through here or just by typing the word sphere, is just a script that says put a geometry node down, and inside that geometry node stuff it with a sphere, and up here we'll call it sphere. But inside here you can do whatever you want. Now while we're here, what I wanted to talk about is this idea of a path. So you can see this tells us exactly where we are. We're in the object context, and then inside the object context we are in a node called sphere. It doesn't mean I'm selecting that sphere. You'll see when I select box, that doesn't get updated. However, we can do something called a subnetwork, which is like a network inside a network. And if I go inside here, you'll see now that our path has added this subnet in here, and I can put whatever it is that I want in here. So let's just put a torus. We'll say our torus is going to connect to that output. And now instead of a sphere or a box, we have a torus. But the idea of this path bar kind of shows you where you are in the scene. And if you right click here, you'll see that there are options that you can choose, like actually seeing the path as a full text, which is useful sometimes. And go back to edit the path graphically. All right, so we'll go back up here, and we will take a look at the panel down here. So this is our animation panel. It has typical stuff that you might be used to. We have no animation, so you won't see anything changing. But we'll add something really quickly. I'm going to go select this, and what we'll do is return this to the starting point. I'm going to hold down the Alt key over the Translate button here and click there. That will set keyframes on all the Translate parameters. I'm going to go to 24. I'm going to move this over here, rotate it, hold Alt, and that will do that. And by the way, if it's not auto keying for you, this is the auto key button. I have that enabled. You can click here and choose auto key. What auto key will do is anytime you make a change to something, it's automatically going to add the keyframe if it needs to. I'm going to hold down Alt just to make sure I've got all of that. And I realize I never did a keyframe for rotation, so let's do that. We'll keyframe our rotations and we'll go back to the beginning. I'll set that to 0 and we'll keyframe that and go here and we'll keyframe that to 0. So now when I move through here, we have a very simple animation. I'm going to play that and it's playing very, very fast. The reason it's playing so fast is because we don't have this enabled. This is our real-time playback, and it will do its best to play at the actual speed that we're seeing things. The options for controlling what you're seeing here are right down here. So this is where you would set your frames per second, the start and end of your time range here. And you can make some various other changes about what you want to display in the timeline here. This would be your looping button here. So you'll see when we get to the end of our time frame, it's going to loop back. However, you can change to only play once. Now it only plays once, or you can zigzag it. So it gets to the end, and then we'll bounce back to the beginning. All right, I'm not going to get into some of these other options because we're not dealing with animation just yet, other than to say that you will see there's a little panel icon down here that allows you to launch an animation editor where you can see the keyframes and adjust values as you need to, and some options for what you would like to see in that parameter window. You have a couple little things down here. These are worth talking about. This is where you would enable or disable simulations. So simulations sometimes will want to recook. That means they'll want to start over and resimulate. And you might not want that to happen if you haven't already said, please lock the simulation by rendering it to disk and stop simulating. So sometimes you may want to stop things simulating by just disabling simulations. And when you do, you'll get this icon here that'll show you no simulations are happening. This can be very confusing for people who are wondering, why isn't my simulation actually simulating? And it's because they may have accidentally enabled this. Now, this is important here as well. This is another thing that catches people up. This has to do with whether you're seeing updates in the viewport. So right now it's saying auto update. Anytime I make a change to a parameter, please show it. I can choose this to manual. And now you'll see that I am moving this torus around, but it's not updating in the viewport at all. And we're even getting a warning here saying, hey, our viewport mode, our update mode is on manual. I'm not doing anything to update the viewport. So what you're looking at is wrong. We can put this back into auto update, and now it is going to show us what has happened here. You can also change this into on mouse up, which can be very useful as well. So I can make the change, and now once I release the mouse, the change is shown. The reason this is useful is sometimes the things that you're doing in the viewport are very heavy, meaning that they take a lot of computational power, and you'll be waiting a while to see things happen, and it won't be real time. It might actually be a bit slow and painful to work. So this can be very useful to say, hey, I don't want you to try to make any changes until I've actually stop my interaction with the viewport, and then you may update. You can make the change. So remember that. This is also really useful if you get a scene that appears corrupted, a node state, or something that has made your scene very tough to open or impossible to open, like it crashes on opening. You can switch Houdini into manual mode, then launch your scene and try to diagnose what went wrong or what's going on, delete out the problem node or resolve the issue, and then go back into auto update. So it is very, very useful to use that. So this is an introduction here just to the parameters in the interface and kind of what's happening in the scene here or in the UI. And in the next chapter, we'll start getting a bit more into putting something together and understanding a little bit more about how this system of Houdini actually works. But for now, what I would do is I would take a few minutes and just go through the panels, play around, see what everything does, experiment, and just learn a little bit about what is here.